Hey, future editing Garm here. I had to redo a bunch of my lines because of technical issues, which also means that I had to try and reconstruct what I was saying. So if it looks like it was dubbed by four kids, that's why. Bonus points if you can figure out where I stopped having to do that. Leave the timestamp in the comments if you have a guess. And now on with the show. Hi, I'm Garmbreak1, and this is Midgardia's cool crowdfunding show. I'm here today with Ryan Lynch. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
So you're here to tell us about Perils and Princesses, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Perils and Princesses is um, a here's the cover of it. It's maybe reversed. It's a rules light fairy tale role playing game. It is inspired heavily by um, things like Grimm's fairy tales, mid century storybooks. I was just rereading this book called The Farthest Away Mountain. Like these kind of um, stories about humble magic and humble adventurers. Also inspired, of course, by some of those mid-century animated movies, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, and it's all about these kind of plucky characters with loads of heart. Um, and uh, it's about how they use their resolve, their grace, and their wits um, rather than just violence, basically. Although they are quite tough characters, they've got um, it's the fairy tale princess dungeon crawl, basically.
Right on, right on. I really like the shade of pink used on the cover, by the way. That
Yeah.
looks very nice.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, I really wanted to do um, like a limited color palette thing, like a two color thing, and then um, you know the inspiration for some of the artwork comes from uh, like layers and layers of influences, right? So you've got uh, these medieval bits of collage, and then on top of that you've got like the titles from Disney movies from like the 60s, and then on top of that you've got the 70s and 80s fantasy, and then on top of that you have like your own imagination, right? Like, so that's where like all the scribbles come in. So it's really this like, because the influences were so varied and so combined, I really want to make the color palette simple to kind of unify all these like different collaged visuals.
Yeah, I really like the art. It's a nice effect. It's really cool.
Thanks.
So I guess the obvious question is, why princesses?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Um so just to like talk about a bit about the birth of this project. It it started, like, there was a time about maybe a little more than a year ago, right? I have a 3-year-old who was 2 at the time, an 11-year-old who was 10 at the time, and I was playing. I'd introduced my 10-year-old to Dungeons and Dragons, and he was really into the lore of that. And I had him running a game for me, so it was just like a solo. He like came up with it. He was running everything, and I was just so inspired by how he did it, how his like 10-year-old mind like built the game. And he did some simple things. Like, for instance, that's how I ended up building the monsters in Perils and Princesses, was inspired by how he would run bad guys in his dungeons. He's like, they've got I would look at his notes, right? And it was really cute because he'd have like three numbers there. He had like, this is their hit points, this is their attack, or what, or like whatever their attack dice or their damage number, and this is what they use to, he called it resist, but I ended up calling it save in there. It's like the monsters don't have six stats. The main characters have three stats. The monsters have one stat, and then it's just like a really simple way for him to keep track of it. And then I was like, well, how do you decide what the monsters do? He's like, oh, I just come up with a new attack every time they turn. I just invent something new for them to do. I was like, that's brilliant. Like, it's just like, yeah, it's just always different. So that's like that half of the game, and then the prince. Yeah, and no, and I was like, this is great because this is like the way in to making a game I can play with him. And then my daughter, who's 3 now, at that time she was on a Moana kick, So we were watching Moana constantly. Um, and then, I, trying to get her out of Moana, which I love Moana, it's amazing. You know, I have always been a huge fan of well, Sleeping Beauty is my ultimate favorite. The art in it, the world in it, the fact that it's like uh the whole plot of it is just like a proxy war between the good and evil fairies that they're like the humans are like just there, but like I just love the fairy tale and the world of it. So I'm watching these Disney movies with her, and I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons with my older kid. Um, I'm watching them play together. I'm watching my little kid put on a princess dress and then grab her big brother's toy sword and just tear it up, like just cause a ruckus. And I'm like, this is, and so then I just started thinking like, okay, what if these princesses were in Dungeons and Dragons? What would Moana do? Would she be like a ranger? Like what if you were in what if you were fighting the lich and you brought all your like animals to come help you from the forest? You know what I mean? I just like started combining these two ways of playing with my kids and seeing them play together. And then thinking back to like all my favorite storybook characters and this idea of fairy godmothers and these like this kind of fairy tale magical world where little things are magic. And I just really that it was the game I wanted to play, and I just started writing it. I was like, I want to play this game with my family and with my friends.
I mean, even normal fairy tales are pretty dark. You know, you've got random women getting kidnapped by dragons, dragons burning down towns. It's just kind of horrifying.
Oh yeah, it can get really dark. So like there's no reason why like that's why I call it a gritty and pretty fairy tale adventure, because there's I think what's interesting is how it's both, right? There's like the Disney version of fairy tales, which is equally valid as like the gnarly Grimm's fairy tales where I don't know, people are always gutting animals and it's something horrible.
Or, dissolving into foam.
Yeah.
So I guess the next question is, what does gritty and pretty mean?
That's a so I I think a lot of this game and why it felt like I needed to make it for my son and my daughter, and for a lot of people who might not have thought that like um, a lot of the fantasy role playing games were for them, is this idea that it's for folks that maybe thought that it wasn't okay to want to be pretty or want to like for me, who I got made fun of for having Lisa Frank folders or something, right? Um, so it's for like that group of people that want to be pretty, but were told they couldn't. And it's also for the people that wanted to be gritty and thought that they couldn't. Like there wasn't space for them in, they wanted to see themselves in these adventures, but none of the characters felt like them or they could relate to. So I really like wanted to make something that fit in that intersection where you've got people who are tough and tender. You've got characters who can wield a sword but also have the power of friendship, or it's really like a du- a duality there. It's perils and princesses. It's gritty and pretty. It's it's a fairy tale, but it's an adventure. Yeah, yeah.
The next one of the core principles is mundane is magic. Can you tell me a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah, yeah. So, when you're playing a game like edition Dungeons and Dragons, no one wants to keep track of torches in like fifth edition, or no one wants to keep track because you're busy keeping track of these insane powers. You've got these like you're managing the inventory of um, different levels of spell slots. You're managing these heroic feats that are just above and beyond, especially once you get past the first couple levels. Um, and then in a game like some of like the OSR games that are gritty and grim and dark, your characters are sort of desperate, right? A lot of times, like you're keeping track of these things because it's these little things like encumbrance or something like that, because it adds to the fact that you're so desperate. Um, for Perils and Princesses, I wanted the mundane to be magic because I wanted the little things like how many torches you have, little trinkets you have, the amount of arrows, these magic items that might not be very powerful but are very special. I wanted every little thing you have to be precious and potentially help you. So the mundane is magic is like, you roll on a trinket table and you get a box of salt, and that is gonna, in like those moments in something like Lord of the Rings or some of those storybook fairy tales like Black Cauldron or something, where you have a little magic thing, and that little thing is ends up making the difference. So I wanted to make sure the scale of it was was such that you weren't keeping track of, how many fireballs you can cast a day. Maybe by level 4 you have some kind of magic item that you can cast one, but um it's all about the scale and making it tender and like little and tactile and personal.
Right, and that kind of ties back into the OSR influence that we were talking about earlier, since a lot of the time you'll be combining a bunch of small things to try and solve problems, as opposed to just whipping fireballs at everything and hoping that it works out.
Right, exactly. It's like, um in some senses it's like a collaborative storytelling game. People use that, but it's also, I always see these kind of games as like an open-ended problem solving game. It's about teamwork, it's about thinking outside the box, it's about um you know using the tools you have and just being creative that way. I think that kind of gameplay always excites me and gets me thinking.
So I know that Perils and Princesses doesn't have classes per se, but can you tell me a little bit about each of the princess gifts?
Yeah, so instead of classes, right, it's whatever your fairy godmother has gifted you, and it's always this kind of, I have 8 classes in the game right now, and 8 gifts, I should say. And each of those is sort of inspired by a different kind of fairy tale, or specifically like a princess archetype. And I tried to work in different references to literature and fairy tales through like their abilities. So um, I'm going to look at them so I don't forget any of them as I'm on here. But so you've got the first one is Wild Heart, is what it's called, and this one is like, this is kind of where I started, right, with the being able to like give a whistle and then all the forest animals come here. And I was like, well, what if that, if you were Sleeping Beauty and you have this power to sing and then the forest animals are your friends, what happens if you level up? Like, what if Sleeping Beauty got really good at that? Well, then, maybe she becomes more connected with the forest, or Snow White, who is another one who is very connected with the forest. I was like, well, maybe they become like this druid, right? So um, as you level up with your wild heart, you're able to like sniff out stuff like an animal, and um, when roar very loudly, and then eventually turn into an animal, which is another kind of fairy tale, classic fairy tale trope of sort of magical women turning into different animals. Then you've got enchanting voice is the next one, which is like a very Walt Disney kind of power. Um, singing songs, like lullabies, like um, basically buffs to your friends, like happy working songs is a trope of like from. Well, I got that from Enchanted, which is the sort of Disney spoof of itself. Um, and then as that, if you have an enchanted voice, as you develop that gift, you've got the ability to do like the classic opera shatter, right? Like the loud, piercing high note, and then a more like the capstone ability of that gift is it's the I Want song, which musical trope, but the thought that like if you were able to sing good enough, you can basically cast wish one time in with your song. Um, and then moving on from there, there's the sprightly agility, which is like the dancer, the acrobat. Um, you've got the elemental elemental connection is one. So that's your Elsa from Frozen. That's your Moana who has a relationship with the water. That's like the Snow Queens and things from classic literature. You've got kitchen magic, and that's the closest thing to like a magic user right now in the game. So that's the person who's got uh, magical goodies, magical concoctions, can make porridge and things uh, that have different effects. Healing touch is a really important one. That's your like Rapunzel. They can make talismans out of the locks of their hair and use their tears to cure ailments and things.
Wild.
Um, power, yeah. Powerful friendship is another one, and I run. This one was really important to include. I was like, I want friendship to be the gift, and what does that look like? Um, so obviously very charismatic, and this is the one that you start the game with an animal sidekick because you have your friend with you the whole time. Um, and then by the end of it, if you level up your powerful friendship princess, you've got almost like a barbarian style rage you can do, and that's like, but you can only activate it if your friends are in danger or if it's to help a friend. So it's that like, uh, to reference Lord of the Rings again, it's Sam. I can't, can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you, right? Like he's just got this such powerful friendship that's what gets. It's not his physical strength as much as his friendship that carries him through. Um, and then the last one is the book smart one. That the sage intellect is the last gift, and that's the um, Hermione Granger. It's Belle. It's the one who can. Um, this is kind of has like the ability I call bookworm, where you can expend some of your resources just to say that you read something somewhere and then it's true. So it's if it's something you could have potentially read in a book, you see a rune you can't read, this princess can say, oh, I read that, I know how to read that because I know how to sail a boat because I read this book on sailing years ago, or I know how to um, do sort of anything they want if it's something they could have potentially read in a book.
That sounds
That's
excellent.
all 8.
Yeah, I can certainly see how
So yeah,
there's like, yeah, plentiful possible fun characters with those 8 gifts.
yeah, and it's fun when they start interacting with each other too. It's like it's just even playtesting. It's just like seeing which different combinations people pick, and then how it plays out is just always exciting for me. Um, just to see see it all come to life because you think of these ideas, you're like, oh, that might be fun, and then you see it in practice and have them work together. It's a fun game to play. I like it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Also, after you get a weapon, I like the progression. You've got, a parasol, which is dubiously a weapon at best, unless you're a Russian spy or something. Frying pan, solid weapon. Big butcher knife. Yep. I mean, it's a cooking knife, but yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want it to all be. I wanted a mix. I'm like thinking, imagining a princess in the castle, and she has to leave all of a sudden, right? Something happens, and she needs to go on her adventure. She might just grab what she has in her bedroom. She might, if she's a kitchen magician, she would have a cooking knife. Or maybe she sneaks and is like, I'm going on an adventure. I need to steal a weapon before I go. So I wanted a ring. I was like, this is just a bunch of, I wanted some everyday items to have fun with, but there's no reason you couldn't also just grab a hunting bow or a battle axe on your way out of the door as you head out on your journey.
As long as you don't leave your weapons on the table, yeah.
Right.
Sorry, just like, and then it's just a knife. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I also really like the art prints that double as pre-gen character sheets. It's a very nice touch.
Yeah, no, I mean, I I'm a my background is in graphic design and illustration and art direction, and that's kind of, as I was starting this, I couldn't help but start with the art. That's just like where that's how I create. Um and I'd always kind of dreamt of doing a game, like illustrating a game for someone, and I just really wanted to. I was like, I'm done waiting. I'm gonna make my, I have this idea for a game. I better make it because then this will be the game I can illustrate. And yeah, so when I was thinking of extra things to add, like the pre-gen character sheets, I was like, oh, I've got these illustrations. Let's put them on the back. So if you want to play the pre-gen, that's cool. If you want to hang them up on the art on your wall, that's cool too. Like, I don't know, it just was a good. I just kind of want to use the resources I already had to make extras.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and yeah, the price point for this is a like 10 USD for a PDF, 25 for a print, which also comes with the PDF, which is yeah, solidly not bad.
Yeah, I didn't want to. I wanted to make it so I didn't want to. I wanted to make it affordable. I didn't want to go crazy with anything like that. I just want I it'd be nice if I can uh, take home a little bit of value for all the labor I put into this at the end of the day. But I would rather um, not go crazy with. At this point, I don't want to go crazy with like huge packages that are very expensive or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's no like 600 page like gold foil stamped, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, no, I honestly like. What's funny is I like the cheapest finish on the book. Like I've tried out a couple other ones. I like the uncoated. It's not like it doesn't have any no foil stamp, no nothing. It's just paper, and I kind of like that about how these are turning out. So yeah, it'll
Yeah,
be.
yeah, I feel that fits the like mundane is magic kind of theme. Like the book itself is not incredibly fancy, but it does contain a world of fantastic adventure.
Exactly. Like it feels good. It's not. I mean, maybe in 3 years I'll release Advanced Perils and Princesses, and it'll have a leather bound. It'll be a leather bound tome with 20 character gifts and a whole thing. But right now we'll start here.
That's yeah, that's the future problems. Uh,
Yeah.
are there any other aspects of Perils and Princesses you'd like to highlight that we haven't touched on?
Um. Yeah. Let's see. So um one of my goals putting this together is to make it pretty easy to run right out of the book. There's uh lots of. I had a lot of fun making tables for random things. Um, there's cool level of magic items. There's uh, tables for how to create your own relics, where you roll up what it looks like, what it does, how do you recharge it. There's a table for making your own mysterious monster. There's a um, random tables for strangers and reaction rolls and different meals and um, I there's not. I wanted to make it simple enough that you could just flip to a page and do it, but I want it and find what you needed to find. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure there was a rich enough place where you didn't have to do too much unless you wanted to. Like you didn't have to like dig deep for inspiration. Hopefully, there's enough in here where you can look at 3 or 4 cool magic weapons and use them if you want, or that'll be enough to set your mind going like, oh, if I'm running this game, this would be a cool magic item for Perils and Princesses. Or if you needed one on the spot, there's plenty in here to kind of go off of too. So
Right. I do love a big random assortment of random tables for any game.
yeah, I mean, even if you use it or if you just read it and are inspired by it, I think it's a useful tool in either capacity.
There is one aspect we haven't touched on. We probably should. What is the intended age range for Perils and Princesses?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So um I've had a lot of. I've been saying 10 and up if you have a grown up to GM and teach it. Um I think if you had a kid who was very interested, you could go a little bit younger than that. But it's a really great family game. It's great. Like um, demoing it, some of my most fun were when I would run the game for a whole family. You got mom and dad, and then like a 2 siblings, and then you've got, and it was just great because like sometimes dad or mom will have like a background in role playing games, and then the kids, this will be new to them, but then they'll see princesses. It looks cool. It's easy to learn, and then they're on board. And then just seeing how the family, like it's a great family game. It's a great game to run for your kids or your friends. Um, Again, role playing games might be tough for like a group of 10-year-olds unless they like were unless you had one kid who really knew what they were doing. Might be tough for just kids to run it, but who knows? I don't know. I just I haven't tried it that way. It's always been me or another grown up teaching kids, but yeah, I think 10 would be a great age.
Yeah, fair enough. It's like kind of after they graduate from My Little Pony, Tales of Equestria, then you bring them on to Perils and Princesses.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like it's sort of a because not um like these rules are, very inspired by a lot of like the nuts and bolts of it are pulled from, some standard things you see in the OSR, but the OSR is not always kid friendly, right? Because it's all about a lot of times is about um being
Large,
brutal and being deadly. So this
yeah,
isn't, yeah, right. So this, but at the same time, I just my experience with kids, and maybe it's my kids or just kids that um I've tested this game with, is those kind of like no nonsense rules, or like the simple kind of way of like the simple physics of how things work and having like a limited inventory and those things. I think kids respond to that really well. There's a lot of I've seen a lot of I've seen some, kid RPGs or family RPGs that are very story focused, which is great. It's not something I'm not familiar with that. Like I'm not a PBTA expert. I'm not a story game expert. Um, but I think there's room for a more physics based, or even just, I don't know what to call it, but more of um, a system that has story, but problem solving and that kind of thing. I think kids respond to that just as well as um, something where the abilities they have rely around kind of like plot points and that kind of thing. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but
no, I
I just
got you.
think the yeah, I like it, like divorced from the brutal nature of old school role playing. I think the rules, because they're so simple and matter of fact, I think that can speak well, that works well with kids. Um, yeah,
Yeah, there's no super
as long as the
complicated
character doesn't
phrasing.
die like a,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, some people, yeah, this game isn't, there's chances your character won't die right away or anything like that. But there are consequences, and there are um, you know, there's lots of opportunities to think creatively.
right on, right on. I mean, yeah, it looks like a fun game, and I definitely know people who would be interested in this for, nieces that they want to induct into into tabletop role playing and the like, and nephews for that matter.
Yeah, for sure. Again, princess, the a lot of the characters I drew are pretty feminine, but a lot of them are also pretty androgynous. Princess is not a you don't have to be any particular gender to be a princess. You need a gift from your fairy godmother and a willingness to go on an adventure, and that's another important kind of piece of this puzzle, is that um, yeah, anyone can be a princess. Your princess can be any gender. You you just need a fairy godmother, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, you don't even have to be royalty. Cinderella wasn't.
No, no, or maybe, right? Maybe you don't even know your royalty. Maybe, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, it's been great talking to you, and like I said, the colors and art on this book are fantastic. I think people are gonna love that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean that's what I know best, and I want to make sure that um, what there was a really easy gateway into this world, and you could look at it and immediately know what the vibe was, and want to check it out, and play in the world.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, it's been great talking to you. And yeah, if you're
Yeah, I
watching,
appreciate it.
yeah, and yeah, there's a link to this down in the comments below. Go back to project. There's like 14 days left when this video goes up, so yeah, go back, go get into a fight, win over a dragon, make some animal friends, and yeah, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.